So just outside of the banana forest and all the earthworks there, we start coming into the market garden. So on one side of the market garden, I've got a highly intensely managed side of the market garden. And on the other side, I've had to let go and allow nature just to reclaim it. And it's a much weedier side of the garden. So if we come down here, you'll see a distinct difference between the way that these two gardens are being managed. And that's because I'm not always intensely growing in beds all year round. I like to let some beds rest. And so with these beds here, it may look quite weedy, but I've actually allowed the weeds and also seeds to act as a cover crop to keep the life going in this garden while I'm not potentially using it. So all of my cover crop seeds I got from Kandanga Farm Store, and they gave me a winter cover crop that I could just throw out here, and there's 12 different species that are in that cover crop. You probably have to check their website for which ones they are. But there's like woolly vetch and tillage radishes and barley and different types of annual grasses in there. But all I've done is just cast out my seeds, and all the plants here are now holding the fort while I allow all the pollinators to do their work, while on the other side, it's going to be much more intensely managed. So my beds are always going to go through this succession of growing, having seedlings grow into vegetables, then they're going to flower. I'm going to collect the seeds. I let everything else start to flower, and then I just leave it for 3 to 6 months or however long it takes for me to get to these beds. And then when the time comes, I'll actually just chop it all with a whippersnipper, drop it all, and start putting layers of lucerne and mulch and what we call the magic potion. I start dunking all of that into a magic potion and create a bit of a no-dig worm lasagna, and then I can just start to pocket plant and put all my compost into it, and then it becomes the next beds of the season. And then the beds that are being intensely managed, they become the weedy and the cover crop garden, and it kind of flushes through everything every single time, from weeds to being chopped and dropped to being intensely grown in. So we've just done a huge chop and drop in this area, and as you can see, I've pocket planted all different vegetable seedlings into a really, really densely layered vegetable bed. And it doesn't take me very long. I can just open up any part of this bed right here, and I have to go through layers upon layer till I get really nice crumbly soil that's full of life, and it's got fantastic water retention. And you can pretty much open up any of these beds and you're going to find a very similar result. And we haven't really even started to add the compost to these beds yet. We've put a little bit of a sprinkle of cane from Red Soil Organics compost in there, just to use as a bit of a soil conditioner, but that's about it. The rest has been different layers of straw, lucerne, straw and lucerne. And then, as we're talking about swales, all my pathways in this market garden are actually on contour. It makes it very easy to travel from one side of your garden to another if all the pathways are on contour. So I've excavated all my pathways, so excavated all the topsoil, taken the topsoil from the pathways, put them into the veggie beds, and then I've filled the pathways with arborist mulch. So arborist mulch is a mix of fresh mulch of softwoods and hardwoods and bits and pieces. And I use that mulch to fill the pathway, and now it's become a mycelium highway, so a fungal highway that is going to connect these two beds. And so just under here, it doesn't take me very long to find the moisture in these beds, but this is a beautiful fungal pathway. It's not only a fungal pathway, but look, it's almost soil itself. I'll probably be able to harvest these pathways soon and add them into the veggie beds, but it's a fantastic water battery that's running through my entire market garden. And whenever we have extremely dry periods just through the power of osmosis, my veggie beds are going to start to absorb the water out of my pathways and maintain soil moisture much longer into the dry periods. So it's stacking functions. It's a swale that captures water, that breeds mycelium, that has the whole soil food web in there. It holds onto water and I can walk across it with my wheelbarrow, and so many different functions happening at the same time. We're just talking about a pathway. So anyone who's been into my garden will notice that I've got these big drums spotted all throughout the garden. And these drums are used to make a magic potion. And the magic potion it was kind of an evolution of the work that was done by the Hunzas in the Himalayas. So if anyone's ever read the work of Albrecht, Pfeiffer or Weston Price, they did a lot of work on working out the mineral density and the mineral density and health of particular indigenous cultures from all around the world. And when the healthy Hunzas were reported on, or they did a study on the healthy Hunzas from the Himalayas, what they found was the Himalayas were such a mineral dense mountain that when the glaciers on those mountains would grind down the mountain face, it would actually churn up the rocks underneath them, creating a very fine powder that when the glaciers would melt, it would take that mineral powder and create what's called a glacial milk, and then go down the mountainside into the rivers, and the healthy Hunzas would intercept that glacial milk and add it into their agricultural systems and have an incredibly high mineral dense diet, because they'd add it to their compost, add it to their veggie gardens, and which soil health equals plant health equals human health. And it can be found that some of the healthy Hunzas were actually alive to about 120 years old, and others say that that's their average lifespan. So soil health is doing a lot for our plant health, and our plant health is doing a lot for us. And you'll find that a lot of the vegetables these days from your supermarket have very low mineral density, and that's showing in our health as well. We're having all sorts of gut problems and all sorts of allergies and reactions, osteoporosis, poor calcium. So in these drums, we actually create our own glacial milk. We'll add rainwater in there. We don't want to use town water because town water's been treated often with chlorine. We'll put worm juice in here. We'll put fish emulsions in here. We'll put liquid seaweed in here. We'll put highly paramagnetic crusher dust in there. And we'll also put clay in there. So by mixing just some of those ingredients, there's more secret ingredients. You probably have to spend a day with me on a course to go through them all. I call them the dirty 30. But you can make amazing batches just with those ingredients that I gave you. Mix that all up, put it into a watering can and start putting it into your garden. And here we have an area of my garden that is being cultivated. This is the first time that we've ever cultivated in these beds. And I can look at a lot of these vegetables and I barely see any blemishes on any of them. And that's because we're always looking at soil health. I've got beautiful snow peas climbing up this trellis here, Chinese cabbages, tomatoes and garlics, a whole bed of potatoes, more cabbages because we like to ferment them. But this is just a very quick glance of one small area that we've cultivated using this method of permaculture principles and permaculture ethics, and it's working fantastically for us as well. Now, if we go above these gardens here, you'll see that I've actually designated entire veggie beds to plants that don't necessarily give us food. They're actually pump plants. They're plants that I'm using to pump minerals from the subsoil and down in the below the topsoil, bringing them up into their leaves so I can chop them and drop them and put them into the veggie garden or put them into my compost system, because they're a fantastic way of being a dynamic accumulator of minerals. So I've got arrowroot in here, I've got comfrey in here, I've got aloe vera. I even put a bit of lemongrass and sometimes vetiver grass in there for a bit of extra added mulch. And I've got some pigeon pea just growing above them as well. So I'm kind of getting a couple of layers of the forest in there. And it's just a really fantastic way to have multiple beds like this. You know, every 2 or 3 beds you want to chop and drop beds so you can start building soil just with these plants. Now, I haven't just put this bed here sort of willy-nilly, so to speak. I've strategically placed these beds here directly below my compost engine room. So I have my compost engine room at the top of my market garden. And the reason why I have it at the top is because, one, it's much easier to transport downhill when I need to harvest from it. There's nothing worse than making a big batch of compost and then having to push it all the way up the hill to the garden. And two, because if we ever have a heavy rain and some of the minerals leach out of this, it goes directly into one of my swale pathways, sits in there, and then my pump plants pump it back up into the leaf foliage. I chop it and I can put it back into the compost, or I can chop it and put it back into the veggie bed. So this compost has been sitting here for approximately 6 months, and I can just show you what's happened in that 6 months. I'll take off some of these. You can see the life. People don't like slater bugs, but they are doing a fantastic job of breaking this down into a beautiful frass. And you get really, really rich soil, deep earthy tones in that soil when you smell it. I've put a lot of minerals in here. I've put a lot of the dirty 30 plants in here, things that are natural growth hormones, tricontinol, gibberellins, particularly from the seaweed, tricontinol from the lucerne, and a lot of manures. I did a little bit of inoculation with some of the microbes that I brew. Lactic acid bacteria, very easy one to make with simple household items. And we're getting this amazing soil, which I've got 3 of these piles here. 3 piles is enough to do this market garden probably 1.5 times over if I used it conservatively, just using it for pocket planting and inoculating my no-dig worm lasagna beds. But that's more, that's worth its weight in gold and more than enough for me to grow some really, really amazing vegetables just with these 3 piles situated at the top, so I can just flow minerals down, and anything that ends up leaving the system is actually caught by a final swale at the bottom of the market garden, which is then caught by another set of chop and drop plants. And if I chop them, bring them back up to the top, I've now created a closed loop of minerals.